The galaxy remembers wars, conquests, and fallen empires, but it rarely remembers kindness. And yet, it was kindness that shook the foundations of an empire, older than the stars themselves. A lone human, fragile, mortal, insignificant by galactic standards, dared to do something no one else would. He knelt beside a wounded creature feared by all, a dragon whose broken wings stretched wider than a battlefield. He did not see power. He did not see terror. He only saw pain, and chose to heal it. Whispers tell us that this dragon was no ordinary beast. He was the hidden emperor, ruler of 1,000 worlds, breaker of armies, master of fire and shadow. And while the galaxy trembled before his wrath, one human's gentle hands stitched his broken wing back together. They say empires are built on steel, blood, and fear. But what happens when the fate of an empire rests on a single act of compassion? When humanity, so small, so fragile, dares to change destiny not with weapons but with mercy. Tell me, and what power is greater than that? The colony world of Vera 7 was quiet, almost too quiet. Humanity had only been there for 20 years, building fragile towns beneath the pale light of twin suns, wooden homes reinforced with steel beams, farms carved out of alien soil, children laughing in streets that still smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. Among them lived Elian, a nurse. Not a soldier, not a hero, just a man with steady hands and a heart that had healed far more wounds than it had ever caused. His days were filled with tending to scraped knees, fevers, and the occasional miner's accident. Life was simple. Life was ordinary. But the colony lived in the shadow of stories' whispers, carried by traders who dared cross the black between stars. They spoke of the dragons of Kareth, ancient beings whose wings blotted out the skies, whose fire reduced armies to ash. Most dismissed them as myths, bedtime tales designed to frighten children into obedience. But others swore they had seen shadows pass across distant moons, wings wider than continents. Elian never knew which stories to believe. What he did know was the fragility of his people. A single drought, a broken shipment of supplies, or a sickness could reduce the colony to dust. Humanity was not mighty here. Humanity was surviving, by thread, by spark, by sheer stubbornness. And yet in that fragility there was hope. On market days, the square filled with laughter. Farmers traded fresh fruit grown in alien soil. Children painted crude murals of Earth, even though none of them had ever seen it. Mothers sang lullabies in languages older than the stars. Fragile, yes, but alive. Still, sometimes Elian would pause at the edge of the fields and look at the dark forest that stretched for miles. The trees were twisted, older than human memory, and at night, strange roars echoed through them. The colonists told each other it was only the wind. But Elian knew the sound of pain. Something lived out there, something wounded. One night, under the twin moons, he heard it clearly. A cry low, broken, almost mournful. Not the sound of a predator hunting, but of a creature suffering. The villagers bolted their doors, whispering prayers. But Elian stood still, heart pounding. Every instinct screamed at him to hide, to wait, to let the night swallow the sound. And yet he couldn't, because he was a healer. And healers don't walk away from pain. And this, my friends, is where the story truly begins. If you want to see how one fragile human's choice shook an empire, make sure you're subscribed, because the storm is only just gathering. Elian pushed deeper into the woods until the twin moons were nothing but pale coins. Behind the gnarled branches, the air tasted of iron and smoke. Silence pressed on him like a hand. Then he saw the shadow enormous and still sprawled between two ancient trunks. The dragon was larger than any story had prepared him for. Scales like hammered metal, a wing, shattered and folded at a grotesque angle, hung from the shoulder like a ruined sail. Its breath came in ragged, thunderous sobs. One eye vast as a basin and the color of dying stars fixed on him. Pain lived in that eye. Fear, too. But beneath both was a terrible old pride. Elian's fingers trembled. He had patched miners' lungs and sewed fishermen's hands. He had never treated a wound that could have swallowed their village. Still, the sound of suffering uncoiled something in him. He recalled his mother's hands, steady, warm, refusing to let a child's fever be the last thing he would remember. He knelt. He moved with all the small, precise gestures of a healer. Bandage, whisper, cold poultices. He tore strips of canvas from his own shirt and wove them around broken bone. He used oil and herbs that smelled faintly of home. The dragon flinched with every touch. Once a gout of pain spilled from its throat and the ground shuddered. Elian answered with a softer voice. He spoke to it like it was a sleeping child and not a thing that could level mountains. They were not alone. The forest carried sounds now, flapping wings far above. The metallic cadence of distant engines. Scouts not human moved through the underbrush like wet ghosts. They smelled wrong. They moved with the efficiency of predators who had known victory for centuries. Elian paused, hand on the fractured joint, and listened. Dread threaded his spine. A single shout ripped through the trees, an alarm from the village. Light blossomed on the horizon, search beams, then the cut of falling fire. The colonists had no time to understand. The first of the Imperial razors screamed down low, precise, cruel. They were not simply hunting. They were warning. No one may touch what is theirs. Flames ate a granary. A child's cry was cut off by the thunder of a plasma volley. The sky filled with shapes, winged sentinels, armored riders who laughed while they raised. The Imperial forces moved like a tide, devastating, deliberate. They struck not for conquest, but for message. Mercy would be punished. Compassion would be carved out of memory. Humans ran. They gathered what they could. They tried to hide behind walls built for storms, not for dragons. Men with hammers and women with scythes answered a call older than fear. Protect what you love. They threw themselves into the breach. They lit crude barricades and hurled makeshift explosives learned from miners. A farmer named Losa drove a tractor into an advancing squadron and toppled it. A teacher, Mira, grabbed a rifle and became a leader. Small, stubborn victories, sparks flaring against a storm. Anger came like a bright, brutal thing. Where fear had bent men into running, fury stood them up. "They will not take our children," one shouted. "Not while I can breathe." Hands that had planted seeds now swung steel. They fought with a fury born of starvation, of long nights and colder dawns. Elian watched them and felt a new heat rise. He had started as a healer, but he could not stand aside while the people he loved burned. They were brave. They were brave and they were outmatched. The Imperial units were many and precise. For every sentry the colonists felled, 2 more took its place. Fire ate through roofs. The water supply choked with ash. Bodies stacked like fallen trees. The colony's best defenses, courage, cunning. Community proved thin against weapons that bent reality into death. Yet there was no kneeling. Even as the gates splintered and the main square became a furnace, the villagers did not lower their heads. Elian found himself at the center of the chaos. Blood on his hands and the dragon's breath stinging his face. He had a choice that sliced him open. Stay to finish healing the creature that had drawn the Empire's ire, or run and try to save as many as he could. He chose both. He tied stronger ropes from felled trees and dragged water from a ruined cistern to the dragon's mouth. He sent others to the barricades. He gave a child a bandage and told her to run. "Bring them to the mill," he said. "There's a cellar." He sent Mira with an armful of children and felt his heart tear. The dragon stirred. It rose on trembling haunches, nostrils flaring, and the pain made it convulse, in a roar that shattered windows in the farthest row of houses. For a suspended moment, terror and tenderness collided. This impossible creature, at once monstrous and broken, lifted its head and fixed that basin of an eye on Elian. The dragon did not attack. It only watched. A slow understanding rippled across its face. Not gratitude the way humans felt it, but recognition of a hand whose touch had given it life where there had been none. Above them the sky darkened further. Not just scouts, not just riders. A new sound rolled in the deep. Software-throated hymn of warships aligning on the horizon, blotting out constellations with their hulls. Banners unfurled, sigils of the Carathian Empire, whole poems of dominion embroidered in living flame. The colonists, huddled in wreckage and ash, looked up as if up could save them. Elian's chest tightened. The dragon's wing wrapped, steadied. Bandaged by human hands twitched as if testing a promise it barely dared to trust. Around them, men and women readied themselves again, not from hope, but from a stubborn, blazing refusal to be erased. Then, through the noise, a voice came crackling on a far-range transmitter, an officer's tone, cold and amused. "Any who harbor the Emperor's blood will be cleansed," it said. "Drawn and burned, leave now and you will live as servants. Resist and you die as traitors." Silence answered. Then a child screamed. Then someone spat profanity into the void. Then 1,000 small human sounds swelled into a single, terrible chorus of defiance. The village would not kneel. They would stand. They would buy a single, impossible moment of future for those they loved. The camera of the cosmos pulled back to show the tiny, stubborn figures on Vera 7 ants under a god. Above them, an imperial shadow resolved itself into a fleet. Below them, a broken wing trembled and, faintly, began to mend. The horizon split with flame as the vanguard descended. And in that blade of light, something ancient and imperial moved a signet none had seen and none would forget. If you feel that fire, if you're with Elian and against impossible odds, hit like and subscribe now. Share this with someone who loves stories where little things become legends. The storm is coming. The sky over Vera 7 was no longer sky. It was fire. Imperial dreadnoughts hung above like iron suns, each one capable of erasing continents with a gesture. Their light bled red across the horizon, painting the shattered colony in the colors of ending. Soldiers in obsidian armor descended in waves, wings of steel and flame, chanting oaths of conquest older than Earth itself. The villagers gathered in the square, battered, bloodied, defiant. Their walls had fallen. Their weapons were no more than tools of soil and stone, yet not a single head bowed. Children clung to mothers. Fathers raised picks and blades dulled by work. Farmers, teachers, miners, nurses, ordinary humans, standing against eternity. And at the center of them all Elian, the healer who should have run, the man who should have stayed behind closed doors. Instead, he stood with blood-stained hands between the people he loved and the empire that sought to erase them. The dragon's colossal shadow loomed behind him, still weakened, its bandaged wing trembling. The first strike came swift. A surge of plasma tore through the square, vaporizing stone, sending shockwaves that hurled people into the dirt. A farmer named Losa staggered back to his feet, chest charred, and screamed, "We do not kneel," before falling into the ashes. His cry carried. Others echoed it, again and again, until the words became a living wall stronger than any steel. The Imperials advanced. Their weapons hummed, their armor gleamed, and yet humanity moved. Side by side, hand in hand, they fought, a mother shielding her child with her own body. Miners swinging hammers until their arms broke. A teacher standing atop rubble, firing stolen rifles with perfect calm. Her voice steady. "Hold the line!" Every moment cost blood. Every heartbeat was borrowed. And still they did not break. Elian darted between them, stitching wounds, shouting encouragement, dragging the fallen to cover. Fear clawed at his ribs, but fury lit his veins. Each life saved was a defiance carved into the universe. He knew they were outmatched. He knew the Empire would not stop. But he also knew kindness once given never truly dies. Above, the Imperial fleet opened its maw. Energy gathered, bright as newborn stars, preparing to erase the colony in a single blast. It would be quick, clean, final. Elian looked at the dragon. Its eye burned with rage and shame. An emperor broken, a god reduced to helplessness. It had never known compassion until this fragile human knelt beside it. And now it watched those same humans burn for daring to care. The dragon moved. Slowly, painfully, with a scream that cracked the air, it stretched its broken wing. The bandages tore, blood spilled, but bone held, flesh mended. Human hands had made it possible. With a convulsion of impossible strength, the beast rose to its full, terrible height. For the first time in centuries, the Emperor of Kareth revealed himself. The soldiers faltered. Their chants stuttered. The fleet hesitated, because the figure they had sworn to obey, the being they believed untouchable, now stood not as their master but as a wounded survivor. Standing with humans, not above them, the dragon roared not of conquest but of defiance. Its voice rolled across the land, scattering invaders like leaves in a hurricane. A single beat of its massive wings shattered airships. A second split the clouds. Then, with fire drawn from the heart of suns, it carved through the heavens, ripping Imperial banners into ash. The humans below rose with it. Fueled by awe, fury, and unshakable unity, they surged forward. Pitchforks struck armored soldiers. Stones cracked visors. Farmers and children fought shoulder to shoulder. Humanity became more than fragile. It became unstoppable. But the fleet still loomed. The great cannon above reached critical charge. A single beam would annihilate dragon and human alike. The Emperor's eye flicked downward to Elian. Silent understanding passed between them. Sacrifice. The dragon launched skyward, tearing into the flagship like a living meteor. Armor split. Fire roared. The ship's cannon discharged too early, ripping apart half the fleet in uncontrolled fury. The explosion consumed the heavens in blinding light. On the ground, the shockwave hurled Elian to his knees. He looked up, blinded by brilliance, and through the searing light he saw it, the silhouette of a dragon wing spread, body ablaze, carrying the fire into the heart of the Empire's might. And then silence. When the flames faded, only wreckage remained. The flagship was gone. The fleet scattered. The colony smoldered, but it stood. Against all odds, it stood. Elian staggered to his feet, lungs burning, body broken. Around him humans embraced, wept, shouted, sang. They had survived. But high above, fragments of armor still drifted in the light of twin suns. No body, no corpse, only ash and rumor. Was the Emperor truly dead? Or had he simply vanished, carrying a debt that no empire could repay? A single ember drifted down from the sky and landed in Elian's palm, warm, alive, a whisper, carried on the wind, echoed in his mind. Kindness does not die. It changes everything. Elian closed his hand around it, and the screen cut to black. If this moment gave you goosebumps, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more epic H.F.Y. tales, and share it with someone who believes in the power of kindness. The fires of Vera 7 smoldered for days. The air was thick with ash and the smell of burnt steel. Fields once green were now black scars. Homes were shattered, families torn. Names whispered over graves hastily dug beneath alien stars. Humanity had paid in blood, and the cost would echo for generations. But they had survived. The villagers who once lived in quiet anonymity were now bound by something far greater than survival. They had stood against an empire. They had seen gods bleed. They had fought alongside a creature who had once been their enemy, perhaps even their executioner. And at the center of every whispered story, one name passed from mouth to mouth: Elian. Not a warrior, not a general, a nurse, a healer who refused to walk away from pain. His act of compassion had altered the fate of worlds. His bandages had steadied a wing that would rise against tyranny. His voice, steady and human, had given courage where none should have existed. Traders who visited the colony carried tales far beyond its borders. They spoke of farmers who defied soldiers, of teachers who fought like soldiers, and of a dragon who rose in fire not to destroy, but to protect. These stories spread like wildfire carried on starships, whispered in markets, translated into a dozen tongues, and always at the heart of them was a single truth: humanity had changed the story. For too long, humans had been seen as fragile, insignificant insects crawling on the fringes of empires. But after Vera 7, they were something else. Dangerous, yes, but also unforgettable. For what empire could truly conquer a species willing to fight for each other? Not with armies or weapons, but with compassion that could bend the will of an emperor? Yet among the survivors, grief lingered. Mothers without children, children without fathers, empty chairs at broken tables. The colony had won, but the price was written in names carved into stone. Elian himself bore scars that would never heal. Some nights he woke with ash still in his throat, hearing the roar of a dragon vanishing into fire. Was the Emperor dead, or had he simply left, watching from the shadows, owing a debt he could never repay? None could say. But sometimes, when the twin moons rose high and the forest grew still, Elian swore he felt a distant rush of wind, as if wings brushed the sky. The galaxy would remember Vera 7, not as a tragedy, not as a conquest, but as a reminder. Even the smallest act of kindness can ripple into eternity. Even the weakest species can stand unbroken. Even a nurse with nothing but cloth and courage can alter the fate of empires. And so the question remains, whispered across stars, carried in the hearts of every survivor. If one fragile human could change destiny with nothing but mercy,